we have got a brilliant hurling treat for you on this Thursday morning. Tommy Walsh, as you can see, is with us. Tommy, how are you getting on?
Great, Eoin. The fans are back, so I'm back. I'm happy out.
You're championship ready.
It was a nice surprise because I think it was supposed to be two separate matches in Portlaoise Saturday, and when I was talking to the lads, so I told them I was available Saturday, and just happens then there was a change about an hour later. We're heading to Croker, so 8,000 people. Great excitement around.
It'll feel like the Marathon now with 100,000 people, I'm sure, in that. we were there in Semple last year in front of nobody for that Clare Limerick game, and hurling is one sport that badly needs the fans, isn't it?
It needs the fans. God, it does. And I think even all sports really need fans on. Like even when you're at training, if it doesn't have to be a full house. It's just, if there's a few people there watching, like in a club ground, you only need maybe 50 or 60 people and the atmosphere is like the Americano, as you said. So, no, it's great to have him back. And like we were training there only a couple of weeks ago, and two of the, more senior members of the club, Tom Clear and Jim Coogan, they were sitting down underneath the scoreboard and someone put a few tyres on top of each other. Two great men of the parish. They're retired now at this stage. They have training to go to now. They're there the whole time, every, Tuesday and Friday and the weekend. And even from the players, just looking out at that, nearly bring a tear to your eye. So, no, great to have the fans back. And, you're working hard during the day, working hard. Some guys are on weekend shift work. To have something to look forward to, like, right, there's a match Tuesday or there's a training Friday. It's just great to have that focus. And what I missed most of all was the competition. There's a match, you win, you lose. You're happy, you're disappointed, but there's, emotions and feelings. And, we're coming out of hopefully the lockdowns now, and sport-wise, there's fans coming back to games, and it's a positive for everyone, yeah.
For sure. We wanted to talk a little bit about the different art forms within the overall art form of hurling this morning, Tommy. And for you, what is the highest form of art when it comes to hurling? Because a lot of people have different views on this.
Yeah, you have in all sports, you have players that are competitive. You have players that, will train hard, will do everything that's asked for them. And on the big days, they will turn in, good performances. But then you have the geniuses. These are the guys that just bring the sport to a new level. You look at the darts, and you're looking at the darts, like you have Van Gerwen, you have the power. Like, you get an extra few thousand looking at looking at the sport when there's these geniuses playing. I remember Nate Quinn and Kilkenny used to say that when DJ Carey was playing, when Gore and Young Ireland's, when they were in the county final, to be an extra 15,000 people in it to see DJ Carey. So, it's Messi, Ronaldo. Like you clue into these games just to see these guys. And hurling is no different, and it depends, I suppose, if you're a defender or a forward, but probably the highest art form in the game is to be able to win your own ball and put it in the back of the net. I think that's what we all love to see. That's what wins games. Like they say, forwards win games, defences win championships. But if you go back to any of the All-Ireland winning teams over the last couple of years or for the last 100 years, they all are great forwards, and they're all able to win their own ball, and they made the most difficult things. Johan Cruyff always said it. They make the most difficult things look simple, and that's the key. So I think myself, the ability to win your own ball, which can often be misconstrued in the wider circles as determination, as the ability just on the big moment in the big day that you turn up. But it could go back to when you were 4 years of age, learning how to catch a ball. Now, learning how to catch a ball is so much different for a forward and a back, first of all, whether you're in front of your man or behind. It's so much different for a guy that's 5'6" than a guy that's maybe 6'3" or 4. So when you're looking at a game on television and that, there's so many things you wouldn't understand than when you're in the mix yourself. So many decisions. When that ball is coming down, landing on top of you, there's so many decisions going through your head that you have to make in probably, 0.5 of a second.
Is it fair to say that moment right before that ball would come down on top of your head was the moment that you were at your best? That was the area of the game that you felt at your most comfortable?
Yeah, well, that's the ball I loved. Like, I wasn't fast, so the tighter the game was, the better. It was all about reading the game for myself and obviously getting that ball into and a high ball down where it's just maybe one-on-one, and that's where I felt most comfortable. But it was probably that was where I learned the trade from a young lad. Like, you're wondering how to do it. We spend hours and hours and hours from, say, 5-6 years of age practicing catching balls, and you don't have time to think really in the big moments when there's 60,000 or 80,000 people in Croke Park, when there's 100 or 200 people looking at you in Ballyraggett or any of the club grounds. It comes from just years and years of practice, and something that you've done in the training ground, at home, in the garden, that it all just it's in your subconscious and it just happens. So yeah, I think that's where I definitely was at my most comfortable. When I was in the defence, it's much more difficult. Though, I mean, the forwards now, it's much more difficult to catch a ball.
When you talk about those moments when you're 5 or 6, is it just you throwing the ball up to yourself? Is it you and a few family members? How does that look?
Yeah, well, it would have started. Obviously, there was big families. The roads weren't as busy, so your friends and cousins, they were all walking up the road to your house every day of the summer, or Saturdays, Sundays after school. Like, there was probably 10 or 11 of us down in this area, and again, it was just walking up from each other's houses, maybe a half mile or a mile down the road. Cousins being dropped over, and we used to play a game. You'd play either 11 pints, so that you'd have to score goals and pints. So you only had to have 3 people to play these games. So you had 1 on goal, 2 lads out the field, and you played to 11 pints, which was 3-2, or you might play to 8 pints, which was 2-2, depending on how much time you had left, depending on when dinner was on. So, but you learned everything then, like the goalie hit it out high, you had to be able to win it high. You could be in front of your man, you had to learn how to guide yourself. You had to stop, then you could pull on the ball. Once the ball was there, you could pull on it. So if you put up your hand and left it there, your hand was gone. So you had to learn how to guard your hand,
Yeah.
And all the hurlers back in the 90s and 2000s would clearly identify with that. You had to learn how to guard your hand from the pull from behind. And that wasn't a dirty pull. It was your man just pulling on the ball, batting it down. The low ball that came out, if the goalie hit it out low, you had to battle 50-50 again, how to win that ball. We also had barbed wire as our sideline. You'd never believe that, but we did. So you had to be able, when the ball went over there, you had to be able to rise it up fast so you didn't get dunked into it. So, you wouldn't have it now. Like, you're thinking of it now, like, it's dangerous enough. But back then we didn't really, we had to keep out the cattle, and that was the main thing,
The Tullaroan Centre of Excellence was a brutal place.
It was, and and then that was the game situation. They're the ones we loved. You love playing games, and you learn the skills throughout the games. The other ones, we had the wall at the back of the house, so you'd be throwing up the ball, jumping off the wall, catching the ball at its highest. Like Christy Ring used to always say that, like, to catch a ball, you had to catch the ball at the highest you could catch it. It just made it much more easier. And then you're say, sometimes you'd be down the hurling field and you mightn't have any hurls. You'd be throwing up the ball amongst 10 trying to catch it. So you learn everything in them little games. And like, you often heard Eamon Dunphy, Johnny Giles, going back to the street football. Well, this is street hurling really. And like, you spend hours on PlayStation, Xboxes, maybe watching DVDs, watching the computers. Like, they weren't there back then, lucky enough. And you go back to Eamon Dunphy and Giles, they were out for 8 hours practicing on the streets how to play football. You're going to improve, you're going to get better. And it's the very, very same with hurling. Like, you take of it, an under-11 team, if they train 3 times a week, maybe twice a week, that's only 3 hours in the week. So you have these guys out in their gardens every day of the week. So that's, 3 hours a day. That's 15 hours a week. Like, Monday to Friday, take 2 days off. So, yeah, I think the skills game, that's where they're learned, and that's where they have to be honed,
The protecting your hand part that you talked there, is that also muscle memory? Is that something that you just instinctively know what height to have your hurl at? You're defending yourself when you're up in the skies?
Yeah. So as a forward, when you're catching it from the front, the defender is obviously going to come and try and clean, usually man ball everything. But but your hand, you're hoping if you push it on the back, you get it free. So you're guiding the hand. You have to keep it, maybe a foot away from your hand, because if you have the hurl basically is kept like that, going crossways, and if you leave it on your hand, obviously when the defender comes and bats the ball, he's going to bat your hurl hand, so you're just going to get it. So you have to leave it about maybe a foot away, so that when he does give it, there's that bit of cushion. The hurl will take the impact of the swing from behind, and you'll catch that ball. And it's the way it should be, because the ball in the air has to be fair game, because you have all different sizes of fellas. Some lads mightn't be able to win the ball from behind, so they have to go and bat it. An important part of a half back line is not to let the ball into the full forward line. So sometimes he doesn't want to catch it, he just wants to keep it out in front of him. So that forward has to learn how to protect his hand. Now you're definitely minded a lot more by the referee now, that I'd say even if you did put up your hand to catch it and someone did come down on it, it probably would be a free. But it wasn't always the case. But listen, it's still an important part to defend. Now also, when you're protecting your hand, you have to protect it as a defender. So if a centre forward is trying to do the overhead pull, so he's pulling back through you, so instead of guarding your hand in from behind, you actually have to guard it from the front. And the really good catchers, they're inviting the forward to pull, because when they get the hang of guiding their hand there, it's a very simple skill, and all you have to do is stick up the hurl. That will take the impact, and the ball just glides into your hand. And so there's so many techniques, I suppose, that looking at it on television, it just looks like he's a good catcher or not, but there's so many different ways. And then if you might have to stand beside a guy, because if you're smaller, you're not going to be really able to catch a ball from the front, because the big strong defender will just come over you and he'll overpower you. So you'll be trying to come in from the side, and that's where you have to use your timing and your technique to nearly shove him out of the way at the last second. And it mightn't be shove him out of the way 30 yards, it could be only 1 yard, and you're in then swiping, trying to catch the ball. So there's many different techniques that have to be practiced out in that garden.
It sounds like you've, throughout your entire hurling life, marked fellas who are bigger than you, and it sounds like that forced you to think in a different way and essentially become a better hurler.
Yeah, well, say Liam Keown would be our current manager, and he would have played with my father on the team that won the county final in '94, and Daddy was full back. He said cornerback, fullback. He would have been fullback that year, but he was like myself. He would have been smaller, maybe 5'8", 5'9", and Liam Keown was showing him the two techniques, I suppose, how to stop the bigger full forward catching the ball, because he caught it in there like there's goal on. So that's where I learned it from. Came from my father, passed it on to me, and then you go out and learn your own way then out in the field.
What has happened to this skill over the last little while? Has it got more important? Has it got less important? Or what is the knock-on impact of high fielding as a result of the tactical changes to hurling?
Yeah, it definitely has a major impact on it out around the middle of the park. So it's still very important in the full forward line and full back line, because it can be the winning and losing of a game. If a high ball comes in, you catch the ball laid off or go in and buried in the back of the net, because there still will be lads under pressure. Like the modern game is probably copy and Limerick at the moment, where you bring the ball out, short passing, the guy in the best position until you get to midfield. He either shoots over the bar or he's driving into the full forward line. So the ball is still coming long into the full forward line, albeit not as irrationally or that. So it's important in there to catch the ball, because it could be the win and losing of a game. Out around the half back line midfield, it's all like 20, 30 yard short passes. So like you're not really going to be catching 3 or 4 puck outs anymore, whether you're a backer or and then there's extra guys there. So, with all the extra guys funneling back, a defender might just want to, let the ball go through into the spare defender. Like we seen John Conlon last weekend for Clare. This guy spent his whole career up in the forest terrorising defences. Yeah. He went back and gave a tour de force, sweeping, as far as I could see anyway, the weekend. So a high ball comes in there. Do you try and catch the ball as a wing back? And, you have a probably 50-50 chance of catching it. Or do you let the ball through in whatever way you have to? So John Conlon is sweeping up. So with the extra defenders back now, it's not as important for you to catch the ball, or even, as I said earlier, to stop the ball going through, because you have a centre back or maybe a spare defender in behind you to win that ball.
Right, that's very interesting. And who would you say is the standard setter at the moment when it comes to high fielding? An individual?
TJ. Like TJ is the greatest I've seen as an all-rounder to catch a ball. So as I said before, it's not as easier, but it is easier to catch the ball as a defender. You're behind your man. You can see everything. There's no one coming at you from behind. As a forward, you have to be able to catch a ball where there's a back kind of hanging out with you at the last. He's shoving you, he's shoving your hurl, he's shoving your hand. He's just really trying to spoil you. And TJ was just magical. He always was and still is. Like, we still see him, even when he's not scoring, he's catching, winning so much ball in the half-hour line. So TJ Reid is the best player I've seen, both as a defender and as a forward, to catch a ball.
Right, and he's always got the best man on him as well, which just makes the art even more spectacular when it comes off. The next thing we wanted to talk about, Tommy, is blocking, and we can throw hooking in here as well. So how does 5 or 6 year olds Tommy Walsh practice hooking and blocking?
Yeah, there's a few different, I suppose, I was looking at a few different hooks and blocks that you'd be looking at. You have the close in one, you have the far away one, and then you have the diving block, which is always the most dramatic and the best, and can often win you a championship game. Even if you go to the football, wasn't it Conor Gormley, the diving block in the All-Ireland for Tyrone against that was against Kerry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it was a fantastic. It could have been Armagh. I think it was Armagh. It was a fantastic diving block, and so that's the third version, I suppose, of the block, albeit it's Gaelic football, but it's the very same in the hurling. So JJ Delaney did one in the All-Ireland against Tipperary 2014. His was a diving hook. I'd never seen one of them before, but Callan was gone, in on goal, and if you had to bury it, you'd say, listen, there's nothing JJ could do, but he dived. I still don't know how he done it on the day, and it was one of the most, and he still had a lot to do, because when you dive, there's still a technique in trying to get in the hook, and a lot of people do miss that. But yeah, very important skills of the game. When you talk about the close in block, Eoin, that would be where I would leave it to the faster guys. So this is where you get in tight to your man. The guys I would have enjoyed looking at over the years, Wayne Sherlock from Cork. He was a brilliant defender from Blackrock down in the city, and with Cork around, the early 2000s. A fantastic defender, great baller as well, but definitely a great guy to get in tight. And at the last second, he was just flicking that ball away from you. So that's where you keep it in tight. You're strong as well. You're able to stop your man from breaking the tackle and getting away from you. Then he only has, 3 or 4 seconds to throw up the ball. So when he throws up that ball, when Sherlock is getting in a flick or a block. Brian Whelan, another magician, one of the greatest, himself and JJ, the greatest defenders of all time. Just a wizard. Club and county could do it. Centre back could do it. Wing back. He was a rocket as well. Very, very fast. And so he would follow you. And at the last, he'd never foul you. You often hear about the lazy foul. But Brian Whelan would wait at the last second, then in he swipes. So he's in close to his man. Other guys, they're kind of defenders, forwards. I would have rated Colin Fennelly, Aidan Fogarty, Taggy and DJ. I know there's guys from other counties as well, but they're lads I can remember from watching them and playing with them. These guys got in tight yet. They harassed you, followed you to the very last second until you thrown up the ball. Then they got it away. Why do I say that? It's kind of, that's nearly more of a skill for fast guys, because if someone gives you the dummy, the boys were able to get back. And still, he wasn't gone away. If you're slower or, heavy-legged and you try to get in close to your man, he gives you the dummy, suddenly he's gone because you have no comeback. You're marking a faster player, and, you might be better off giving away the point, because if he gives you the dummy and he's gone, there could be a goal chance on. So that's the close-in block. As a young fellow on, how did you do it? We were taught it was called genuflecting. So you got down kind of on one knee and just kept your eye in the ball. The things to watch out for as a young player would be slapping the ground. So we were always don't slap the ground. So that was the guy that didn't look at the ball. He was just going in. He had his eyes closed because he was a bit afraid, as you would be as a youngster, because you haven't been taught yet. And you go in and you close your eyes and you slap the ground. You're supposed to go in, genuflect, keep your eye on the ball and just flick away the ball. And that's the way we were taught as youngsters. Now, it doesn't work like that as you get older, but it is a good starting point, how to block. Then the second one would be the one where you block from farther away on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one where you have to stand maybe 5 yards off your man. Pádraig Maher from Tipperary, an outstanding blocker from far away. So he'd stand 5 yards off his, he was fit, Pádraig Maher, but he wasn't a rocket. So I'd imagine that was probably part of the reason. He'd let your man maybe 2 or 3 yards off him, keep the hurl up, and then when he throws it up, he'd be blocking him. But to be far away blocked, the hurl would be maybe, 4 or 5 feet away.
And would he move in when the ball leaves the opponent's hand? Is that it, or does he keep that distance?
Yeah, it depends. I suppose you'd be if you could, when it leaves your hand, to get in, because then you're not going to be dummied at that stage. So it depends on how far you are when you are shadowing him, and depends on probably, you're making decisions on the opponent. You're marking as well. What's he going to do? Is he a dummy or not? So if you think he's fairly straightforward, he's going to shoot, you'd probably try and get in that bit closer. But if he's a guy like, we'll say, Eoin Larkin, and he's as to sell you the dummy, you would be getting in closer, or you'd be staying further away back.
I presume then that most modern defenders are studying their opponent's better side, whether or not they're likely to dummy, and that sort of level of analysis is done nowadays.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But hurling, I still think it's still an instinctive sport. I think if you think too much about it, so many different things happen in a game. I think if you study it too much like that, you'll just drive yourself mad, and it's
too fast.
It is too fast.
Yeah.
And I know in theory it does sound like the best practice, study your opponents, but you could be marking 6 or 7 different guys in a day. And the most important thing I would believe in match day is to be fresh. Listen, you've learned, it's like studying for your leaving cert. You've done all the study, you've done all the training. Now be fresh going in the last 2 days, and just whatever happens on the day, then you just be ready for it, but be fresh on the day.
Can I ask you about the timing of the hooks? Because you said there that a lot of lads mistime the hook. Sometimes when I'm watching hurling, I see a lad kind of reach in and almost leave his hurl in, and he's almost waiting for the hook to happen as a defender. Is that something you've noticed? Is that best practice? Is that how it should be done?
Yeah, I think I learned that about 5 years ago off DJ Carey. We went up to a camp up the north, or Galway, with Martin Fogarty, and he was showing guys how to hook. And I was there, holy God, I haven't seen this before. So you kind of leave the hurl in at hip level, as opposed to you're kind of, managers tend to work hard on, right? So you're tearing after your man, but you can forget actually why you're there at the end when you do reach your man. It's to actually hook him, not to show everyone that you're working hard. So at the last minute, when you're in that mindset, you're trying to work as hard as you can. At the last minute, then you just throw in the hurl. So you have a less chance of, if you're focused and if you have practiced it and trained for it, you're working hard. But with the mindset, you keep the hurl in a hip level. So you're trying to leave it in there as opposed to swiping in at the last second. You're trying to leave it in there, kind of you're overreaching if anything. And as he throws it up, then you're just flicking up, and that's the hook. So now it's easier said than done as well. I said to DJ, there's no point showing me now. I can't catch the lads to hook them now. so you have to be able to catch your man as well. But yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. You have to keep the hurl in hip level roughly, and then you're kind of just swiping up, kind of flicking up such, like to get the hurl.
And that, I presume, it's just the timing of that flick then is the real
timing and angle, would you believe? The angle of your hurl has to be right as well. Depends on your opponent what way he's going to hit it. Difficult to explain, but you're kind of trying to keep your hurl nearly in parallel with his back, and that seems to work best when you're trying to hook a guy. Now, don't hit him in the back. Some lads make that mistake. No, parallel with the back, kind of. But again, it takes plenty of practice.
That makes sense. And the other thing then is, I guess, when we talk about the art here of maybe the high fielding of the hook to block, I presume from your perspective, that feels like a goal. Like, especially in a full Croke Park or in a full Nolan Park, those moments of a block or a high piece of high fielding just is an unbelievable feeling as a sportsman.
Yeah, no, it is. It is, because it deflates the opposition, especially if it's one of their main players and he has a great chance of a score or a great chance of a goal, and he thinks he's going to put it in the back of the net or over the bar, and out of nowhere you get in a hook or a block. It's heartbreaking for him. And if you can win the secondary ball, then either you or one of your teammates, usually you're so kind of delved in that tackle. That's one of your teammates you're depending on to come in and sweep it up. It's absolutely wonderful. And the crowd, it's just as big, especially if you do them under big players. The crowd really get behind you, and it's like a score.
It does seem as well, Tommy, that players, forwards, are much more wise to hooking at the moment, that we're seeing more scores of lads actually just waiting the second for the ball to bounce and then giving the swipe. We're seeing a lot of those scores, I noticed, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, this is where you're talking about the forwards hooking their defenders, is it, Owen?
No, the forwards knowing that there's a defender coming to hook them. And instead of pulling, because they know that there's a fellow waiting to hook them, they just don't swing. They wait for the hook to almost dissipate. And then they swing after the defender's been left in their wake a small bit.
Yeah, no, it is. It's probably to be aware of your surroundings, really. That's what that is. And the better players are getting, the more aware they are. They probably have to be more aware now because, players are gone so fit. Tactically, then there's so much tactics involved in the game. Usually there's 2 or 3 guys after you. So like you go back to 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, usually it was you versus your man. You got past your man and you knew, there was a score on. Now you're wondering, is there another defender coming after me? Is there someone else going to get in a last minute hook? So you have to be able to get it off fast. Donal O'Grady was the first that I seen, he trained teams when they were going in on the goal to bat the ball into the net. He spent some time with Cork, obviously winning All-Irelands. He spent some time with Limerick when they were going through the transition. And a lot of them guys that time, they were batting the ball into the net, which was rarely seen before that, but definitely an important skill in the game now because guys are gone so fit and fast, they're able to get back. There's no unfit cornerbacks anymore with big bellies that when you get past them, you're gone. So, an important skill of the game.
So we've done the hooking and blocking, we've done the high fielding. The last thing we want to touch on, Tommy, is more, I guess, of a tactical and a mental thing. It's the art of contributing to the attack. Is this something that you had to learn a lot more the older you got?
Yeah, no, lucky enough, it was fairly simple until it only really got going as I left. Like, we're in it, the game evolves all the time on. You go back to Cyril Farrell back in the 80s. He introduced the third man midfielder with Galway, that successful Galway team in the late 80s. Then you go on to the Clare team in the mid 90s. Gerloch Nan and Brian Lohan and Dalo and Davy Fitz and the lads, Jamesy, the fitness, they were running up mountains, running up hills in the dark, 6 a.m. train sessions. So they were going to overpower team with their fitness. Then you came to the Kilkenny team. That was all about winning your own ball, being able to win the high balls, to hook and block. And that was their, I suppose, philosophy. The Cork team was the running game. So suddenly every team nearly that enjoyed watching Cork was soloing, putting fast midfielders like Tom and Jerry, soloing up the field, hand passing, drawing the man, score. Then you go on to the Waterford team and the Clare team under Davy Fitz with the sweepers. So everyone was doing sweepers. And now, sure, of course, you have the current game, which is the Limerick game. So what seems to happen in our game and in all games, the trend of following the All-Ireland champions. So at the moment in our game, and a lot of the older generation are finding it difficult to watch because it's not as exciting. Yes, there's plenty of scores, but there's very little reasons for a crowd to cheer, bar the score. There's very little one-on-one where a ball comes in and you're wondering if he wins this ball, it's a goal. Or if the defender wins it and drives it down the field, the crowd are on their feet as well because it's danger averted. So the game at the moment is sharp passing out as far as midfield. The game is so light, the ball is so light now, you can hit the ball on the run from about 80 yards over the bar. So you have 2 choices then. If you have space, the Gerard Hegarty's, Tom Morrissey's, they will just glide that ball over the bar from 70, 80 yards on the run, right and left hand, or they'll hit the ball into their full forward line. Danger men like Gallan and, Seamus Flanagan and the lads Peter Casey. So the game at the moment is your cornerback, goalkeeper, wing back, do not drive that ball as far as you can, unless you're clearing it into the full forward line. It's
also kind of a knock-on impact of this is the positioning of players, how you line up on the pitch. Like, I mean, forwards being positioned as half-backs, essentially. Like, this is the next evolution, as you say, something that Limerick have utilised so well that I guess it's just a necessity now. Is it almost less of an art than it would have been during your playing days with Kilkenny? I mean, it'd be where it was almost a rarity for somebody to be getting forward or having that long effort. It's gone from an art form almost to the done thing, the necessary thing if you're a half-back at inter-county level now.
Yeah, I think, like, if a half-back, we were hurling, tried to score and hit it wide, you could be getting the curly finger 5 minutes later. You had to let the ball into. That's where the danger was. I think we just have to go through this phase. It's not as exciting. It's definitely not as exciting. But I don't think we'll go down the road that we're going to complain about for the next 5 years. We've seen in Gaelic football, they went through their period for a good couple of years where it was tough to watch. It's now back brilliant to watch again, So I think we just have to go through this phase and enjoy what we have. How difficult is it? It is an art form, would you believe? Because, you have to play it in the club. I'm still playing. So you are playing through these new ways of playing. And it is difficult because you have to give a 30-yard pass. There's loads of lads, in your way. You have to get it over them, underneath them. You have to get it into their hand. It's all balls of hand now. So it is a difficult game to play, and it is an art form, albeit it's different and not as exciting.
And also more bodies between you and your intended target if you're trying to play the pass.
Exactly. And if you decide, say if you're under pressure and you want to just let the ball into the full forward line, if you don't look, they could have a spare man back there. So if you hit into him, then sure, that's the whole point. You're trying not to do that. That's why you're playing the ball short. You're not just playing it short for a reason. Another thing that many teams mightn't see as well and notice is the reason it's working so successful, I believe, for Limerick is the size of their half-hour line. So I know Kyle Hayes has gone back half-back now, but usually you'll have Garrod or Tom Morrissey there anyway. And Keane Lynch is no slouch either. He's a ball and muscle. But say if you just take the other two lads, Garrod Hegarty and Tom Morrissey, so they get a short ball to them guys. So there's loads of bodies in the middle third, but the boys are able to break the tackle. So they get a short pass, they'll break the tackle because they're so strong. They're 6'4", 6'5". They've been in the gym for probably 7 or 8 years, and they're able to break the tackle and get it in, solo off with it or whatever they have to do. You have a smaller player, you have a 5'10", 5'9" player out half hard. Try and play the exact same game as Limerick. You give him a sharp pass. If there's 2 lads on him, they'll just bottle him up. Ball be in it'll be in a huddle then, and everyone will be giving out. Will you get the ball in faster? So I think you still have to judge the game and suit the game to the players you have. Like we've seen Clare, I thought was a masterstroke work last weekend. Tony Kelly, we've seen him, out midfield scoring for Ballyhay and for Clare, scoring 7 or 8 points from play, 117, 120, to put them in full forward. So the one place at the moment, if you get good ball in, that you will have space is the full forward line. So they had Tony and the big Aaron Shannon in there as well. So go in a high ball into Aaron, he'd win it, lay it off to Tony or go in himself. Or if they gave it in, so all these corner forwards now, they never stop moving. So they're not just staying at 13, staying at 14, 15. They're moving all the time, waiting for that chance to break. And Tony will be so fast. When the ball did come in, he was always in front of his man. So I'd say if you were to talk to any guy in the full back line at the moment, Owen, it's an absolute nightmare because you're running after your man all the time, and the ball never comes in 50-50 on anymore. It's coming in because your man won't let it in till he sees the forward out in front. So you have no real chance. So a member of the full back line now has to be a defender. He can't just be a baller.
And then just one last question just on that. Did you, when you were in possession of the ball in the big game, would you hit it knowing that you'd be giving the opposition 50-50, or in that split second, would you try and find the 60-40 in favour of Kilkenny, or what was the balance there? Could you just not afford to think about it and just get it up the other end of the pitch, or were you looking for that edge?
Yeah, well, we had fantastic ball winners. So, sometimes we got a bit of, criticism over just always driving high balls into our forward line. But I saw that as a 70-31 for us. You hit a high ball into Shefflin. You hit a ball into Richie Power, high ball. Even our smallest, Cha Fitzpatrick, Eddie Brennan, they were all fantastic men in the air. That was one of their main attributes. Martin Comerford, he was 6'4", 6'5". So I just felt the high ball that time. Myself, Hoagie, JJ, John Tennyson, John Dalton, we used to lump the balls in high. Probably wasn't, get it in low, spray it around. But the high ball into them guys, sure, that's what they wanted. Once they caught the ball then, it was usually man on man, and it was a goal. The only time that we changed was 2011 final. We played Waterford in the semi-final, and one of the Waterford, when we got the ball in the half back line, the Waterford cornerbacks used to run in. We used to hit the ball into the square that time, and because that's where the danger was. And when we hit the ball in the semi-final, obviously we didn't know, but we used to always hit it to the square, and the Waterford defenders used to just run into the square even when we had the ball. So they knew where it was going. So for the final, we said, well, listen, if Waterford were doing that, Tipperary might do it as well. So then we had to start hitting crossfield balls and spraying it around as opposed to direct route one. So we did change it for that final.
So Kilkenny do tactics is the big revelation from this morning, Tommy.
Say nothing.
Say nothing. Tommy, it has been an education, to say the very least. I'm sure people at home will have learned as much as I did over the last little while. It was brilliant. That was the art of hurling, as told by Tommy Walsh. High fielding, blocking, hooking, and contributing to the attack. Tommy Walsh, enjoy the weekend hurling. It's going to be a brilliant weekend, and enjoy the summer.
Yeah, great stuff, Eoin. Thanks for having me. See ya.